All right, welcome to the first episode of Rob versus the SAT. The point of this series is basically I'm going to take sections of SATs or pieces of sections from SATs or PSATs and go through them live. And these are sections that I've never done before, never seen before. Just picked them randomly out of the tests I've got and just going to throw them up on the screen and do them. So basically the point is you can see me work through, whether it's a passage or a math section or a grammar section, work through it real time. You can kind of get some insight into my thought process, how I use the strategies, things like that. So hopefully this will help you get an idea of what the whole picture looks like. Before we start, just some shameless promotion. If you want more SAT videos and strategies, check out my website, link in the description, especially the members area. I've got hundreds of videos for reading, writing, math, all that kind of stuff. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. I picked a reading passage from a PSAT that I had lying around, and I'm just going to start and go through it now. Don't worry about time. I'm going to be talking a lot and giving you some insight into my thought process, so time is not going to be something I'm going to emulate here. I'm not trying to do this as fast as I can, obviously, so just keep that in mind. If this takes 20 minutes, don't think that I would take that long if I were doing it without talking. All right, so what I do, let's go right to the blurb. The following passage is from a 2001 article on the state of the lobster fishing industry in Maine. Okay, so this is about lobster fishing. It's an article. First question. The author refers to the cod fishery primarily to illustrate. Okay, so why does he refer to the cod fishery? Let's see. Many of the leading scientists who track the North American lobster population do so mainly on computer screens in government laboratories, and from that vantage point, lobsters appear to be in danger. From the mid-1940s to the mid-1980s, Maine's lobstermen hauled in a remarkably consistent number of lobsters, but during the past 15 years, they have nearly tripled their catch, raising fears about overharvesting. The situation recalls the recent history of the cod fishery. This mark was done by whoever had this previously. I don't know who did that before. The situation recalls the recent history of the cod fishery in New England, in which an exponential rise in the catch was followed by a devastating biological and economic collapse. So the question was asking, why did the author bring up the cod fishery? And it seems to me, just from my first reading, that they're talking about this general trend of overfishing leading to issues with the population of fish. And it seems that we are using this as a specific example. The situation recalls the recent history of the cod fishery. So using this as an example to illustrate some general trend, something like that. Let's go to the choices. Why scientists began using mathematical models to track fish populations. Where does it really mention that at all? It doesn't really mention math, doesn't really mention anything like that. Why many scientists are concerned about recent increases in lobster catches. Okay, yeah, not bad, right? Because this is going to, I put a check next to that. It's referencing why, here's an example of when people were overfishing, there was negative consequences to the fisheries, so here's a specific example. Why Maine's lobstermen are concerned about the future of their industry. Well, certainly there's maybe concern about that, but that's not mentioned here. They're just mentioning the scientists, so we can get rid of C. How Maine's lobstermen learn strategies enabling to triple their catch, not at all relevant here. We don't mention the strategies, that's not the main point. How environmental patterns tend to recur in certain areas, totally relevant. So I'm pretty confident going with B here, because it's capturing this notion that the scientists, who are being mentioned in the first part, are worried about what could happen to fish populations. In line 15, Sharp most nearly means, okay, in Maine, most men and women who harvest lobsters believe that their industry is healthy, perhaps even too healthy. They worry not about a population collapse, but about recent lobster catches that would lead to sharp declines in prices. So, steep, large, basically mentioning that it's going to be very precipitous declines. So acute, no, not bad, because that's mentioned kind of sharp. Shrewd, no. Gruff, no. Caustic, no. Piercing, no. Yeah, acute is going to be the best one here, because that's capturing the notion that it's a steep, quick, intense decline in prices. Next question. The author supports the claim in lines 21 to 22 by asserting that lobstermen. Okay, so let's keep reading. We'll go there in a second. Even the lobstermen who admit that catches could decline do not see anything wrong with that. They say they are lucky beneficiaries of a boom orchestrated by Mother Nature. If the lobster catches soon return to more traditional levels, so be it. Okay. Now to the question. How does the author support the claim? The lobstermen argue that they are better biologists than the biologists are, and there's something to what they say. Okay, so here it's leading into why this might be true. Fisheries scientists who gauge the effects of commercial lobster harvesting do so using techniques originally designed for tracking fish populations. Because fish are elusive and hard to study, estimates of how well their populations are faring rely heavily on mathematical models. But lobsters are not fish. Here we go. Many of them dwell in shallow coastal waters and are easy to observe, though until recently few scientists had bothered to observe them, and unlike fish, lobsters are not harmed by being caught. Baby lobsters, oversized lobsters, and egg-bearing lobsters that lobstermen trap and return to the sea are none the worse for having taken the bait. In fact, they've gotten a free lunch. Lobstermen know the resource more intimately than do many other kinds of fishermen, and they feel justified in telling the government that lobsters are doing well enough to be left alone. The trouble is that lobstermen tend not to have advanced degrees and scientific data to back up their claims, so their opinion carries a little weight. Okay, so how does the author support the claim that lobstermen know more about lobsters than biologists do? Well, they have more experience. Lobsters are different from fish, so using the same kinds of ideas to track lobsters wouldn't work. They've got direct experience. Lobsters aren't harmed by the fishing process. And in addition, because they don't have that scientific prestige, they're not listened to as much. So something in that sphere, that universe, should correspond to the answer here. Let's see. The author supports the claim in lines 21 to 22 by, asserting that lobstermen are able to avoid harming lobsters that are caught and then released. Yeah, so that is mentioned, right, in here. Here. By asserting that lobstermen believe that lobster catches may soon return to more traditional levels. They mention that here, but not in the paragraph we just read. Have first-hand knowledge of the populations from which they harvest. Yeah, that's actually even better. Than A. We'll come back to these two because we have kind of two choices here. We'll come back. Have accumulated scientific data, not scientific data. In fact, it's the opposite. They don't have scientific data. Have been able to triple their lobster catch in a 15-year period. Certainly that's been mentioned, but that's not why they are better gauges of knowing what's going on with the lobsters. So let's see. Between A and C. Asserting that lobstermen are able to avoid harming lobsters that are caught and then released. So that's certainly true, it's mentioned, but does that support the claim here? Does that support that they're better biologists? Not really. It's a bit too specific. We're looking, again, for something, this often happens, you want to look for something a bit more general than something specific. Even though this is mentioned, it doesn't support the idea that they're better fishers. In fact, this is a much better choice because this goes into the notion that kind of captures everything. They have better first-hand knowledge of the populations, which the scientists do not have. So I'm going to pick C over A here for that reason. The author uses the statement 8:28 to 29 to emphasize that. Okay, so let's go back here. The statement was, change colors, 28 to 29. Because fish are elusive and hard to study in the wild, estimates of how well their populations are faring rely heavily on mathematical models, but lobsters are not fish. So here's the statement, and the question was, what is it emphasizing? Well, it's emphasizing that you can't use what you know about fish, mathematical models, computers, whatever, and apply them to lobsters. You need more experience than that. The commercial lobster fishing industry is economically healthier than many fisheries. Where did we mention that? Biologists are more qualified than lobstermen to make estimates. Again, pretty much the opposite. Techniques used for tracking fish populations may not be appropriate for tracking lobster populations. Exactly. Scientists tracking lobster populations must rely heavily on mathematical models. So certainly that's mentioned, but that's not what's being emphasized here. What's being emphasized is that fish are different than lobsters. Therefore, we can't use what we use for fish that we use for lobsters. Lobster scientists must spend more time doing underwater research. Okay, not mentioned. So the best answer here, I think, is C. Let's look at 47. The passage suggests that all the following are true of fish, except... let's leave this until the end, because it's a general question. The author indicates that the new breed of lobster scientist does which of the following. Let's see. Lately, a new breed of lobster scientists has appeared along the Maine coast. Okay, here we are. These scientists are ecologists, and they spend inordinate amounts of time underwater doing things almost no sane fisheries modeler with a computer and a comfortable office would ever do. They dig for days in the ocean floor to count tiny lobsters. They risk life and limb on shark-infested less 70 miles from shore. See the pop. Gradually, they are concluding that some of the things lobsters may have been saying may be right. So, these new breed of lobster fishing don't just rely. What do? They just don't rely on computers like other scientists do. They actually get in there, just like the lobster fishermen, and get that direct experience with the lobsters. Nope, they don't use scientific data to advise the government. Where do they mention that? They might use computer models, but it's not mentioned here. Both studies and harvest lobsters. Do they mention that they harvest them? No, they definitely study them, but they don't harvest them. Here's an example of half right, all wrong. This is right, but this isn't, so we can get rid of the whole thing. Works with lobstermen in gathering data? Not really. Observes lobsters in the natural environment? Yeah. So the best answer here is E. Let's finish up with this general. The passage suggests that all the following are true of fish, except. So probably what's going to be true of fish is what was mentioned in here, but the opposite, right? fish will not dwell in shallow coastal water. They'll be hard to observe. Scientists do observe them. Fish are harmed by being caught. Let's see. Yeah, something like that. So let's just see what we've got. Fish are generally less susceptible to overharvesting than are lobsters. Do they mention that? I don't think they mention that. We'll come back to that. They're generally less familiar to the fishermen who harvest them than to lobsters are to lobstermen. Did they mention that? I don't know. We'll come back to that. They can be physically harmed by being caught. Yes, that's implied by the passage. Their populations are, yes, that's implied by the passage. Their populations are difficult for science. That's mentioned by the passage. So we got to get between A and B here. So which of the following is not true? Is it not true that fish are less susceptible to overharvesting? Let's see. Gonna kind of go back now. In the situation, we kind of have to go back and scan and figure out what we might have missed. Let's see. Probably gonna be somewhere in this paragraph. Fisheries. Okay. Fish are elusive and hard to study. Estimates require mathematical models. They're not fish. Unlike fish, they're hard to being caught. Here we go. Lobstermen know their resource more intimately than do many other kinds of fishermen. So this is implying that lobstermen know lobsters better than other fishermen know their fish that they go after. So I think that was an answer. Yes, the fish people are generally less familiar to the fishermen who harvest them than lobsters are to lobstermen. Yes, so this is going to be true. Oh, no, wait, hold on a second. This is true, so A is going to be the answer. They don't mention this anywhere, whereas B they do mention above in the passage. All right, so that should be it. What I would do normally if I were doing this as a real test, I'd go back, I'd check all my answers, make sure I didn't want to change anything, but I feel pretty confident. So I'm going to pause the video, go get the answers, and check them, and then I'll be back in 2 seconds. Okay, I'm back and got everything right, so that's good. No other notes I want to mention here. So that's the end of this first episode. I'm going to do other sections besides just reading. If you have any suggestions or questions or thoughts or any feedback as to if this was useful to you, the one thing I probably know is a criticism is I went too fast, and I apologize. I talk and I think and I read fast. So if it was too fast for you, let me know, and I'll try to slow down next time. But otherwise, any other suggestions or thoughts, please let me know. I love getting feedback. Try to make it better next time. All right, so I'll talk to you soon. And, yeah, talk to you later.